Pocatello City Council Candidate Forum for Seat 3. And this is put on by the police and fire unions for the city. I'm Andy Moldenhauer. I'm the fire union president. Messed that up last night.
Matt Lawrence with the police union.
So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with giving each of you 5 minutes to explain who you are and why you're running for the council. And we'll start with Don.
Thank you. My name is Don Zeeby. Ever since I was a kid, with a name like Zeeby, I was always last in line, and so it reminds me of where I'm going to be on the ballot, so you'll find me last on the ballot. I want to tell you a story about a young man by name of Mike. Mike calls Pocatello home. After graduating from Idaho State University, Mike left to serve our country in the United States Army as an EOD officer. And as many of you know, EOD is not the easiest job, it's the most challenging. When Mike's career ended, he wanted to come home. Mike called his father and told him that there were no jobs for an officer with 60% disability to support his pregnant wife and his 2 kids. Sadly, Mike couldn't afford to come home to Pocatello. Like many of you, his dad and mom were devastated. His dad promised Mike that he would do whatever it took to fix it. He pledged to work with the city government to bring more high-paying jobs to the community. His father made a sacred promise to Mike. Mike is my son. That's why I'm running for city council. Not only for Mike, but for your Mike and the rest of the Mikes and Michelles in our community. As a business pro, I'm used to challenging the status quo, changing the rules of the game, as it were. Politicians, they make promises. A business pro, who I am, delivers results. The election, as far as I'm concerned, is about 3 things: jobs, jobs, and jobs. Every child deserves a job here that's in Pocatello, so when they want to return home, they have a high-paying job. The 25 years that I spent in business taught me how to create an environment to bring higher-paying jobs. Others that are running for seat number 3, they're not bad people. They just don't know how to do it. Jobs is what I do. How many of you in this room know somebody that works at Allstate? Raise your hand. Thank you. How many of you in this room shop or know somebody that shops at Costco? Raise your hand. Thank you. How many of you in this room know someone shops or shops themselves at Lowe's? Raise your hand. Okay. How did they get here? I brought them here. That's what I do. This is what I did for my son, Mike. That's what I'll do for your sons and daughters and our grandchildren. To date, I've worked with 21 companies, which resulted in over 1,180 jobs. This is what I do. If you want to know more about what I've done, meet me after this meeting and I'd be glad to spend some time with you. My best friend growing up was John McGonigal. John is a New York City firefighter. He survived the collapse of the North Tower on 9/11. John is my hero. Every firefighter and police officer in America that day became our heroes. We owe our first responders. You are my heroes, and you deserve to be treated like heroes. I've heard it said that you want to feel appreciated. One of the ways government expresses appreciation is paying what you deserve. Now, I understand and I know that that's kind of a top thing on your priority list right now. But you should be paid for the dedication that you give our community. In the past, politicians have complained that they don't have the money for budgets for raises. Here's how I'm going to fix that. This election is about 3 things: jobs, jobs, and jobs. Bringing jobs to this community brings in more people. It brings in more revenue while lowering everyone's tax burden, so the city has more money to pay you what you deserve. I'm standing here today looking each one of you in your eye and making you that promise. Politicians are always working on the wrong end of the problem. Creating the climate for better jobs is just the start. We must push harder for smart spending. Every government department's budget leaks. Every leak wastes your money. For 25 years as a business pro, I spent countless hours finding and replacing stupid spending with smart spending. I believe the officials you elect have a duty to put your needs above all others. That's my promise to every one of you. After all, it is your money. Smart spending, more jobs, higher paying jobs, bring more revenue in, and lowering the overall tax burden. It's just that simple. It's not easy, but it can be done. The incumbent has been in the office for a number of years. Nothing changed. You deserve a change. You deserve a business pro who can bring in jobs and rein in spending. I'm done? Okay. I don't want to go over.
To get more chances to talk.
That's all right. Thank you.
And so what we'll do is one of us will walk up to this podium when you've got 15 seconds left, just to kind of give you a cue that you're running out of time.
I should have been looking at you and not them.
Okay. So Roger.
Okay. I grew up on a farm out north of Fort Hall. I went to church here in Pocatello. I serve that church as a pastor now. I've been here 29 years since I returned. My wife, my 2 children are graduates of ISU. We can talk about good jobs all we want, but some of those are controlled beyond the city limits. My daughter and wife were teachers. My daughter still is. Yet teachers are paid way below what they should be making. There are many people in our community that are paid below what they are making. Now, we need to understand that we have a high rate of poverty. We have the highest rate of poverty in Pocatello of any of the major cities in Idaho. We also have a high incident of people who work but struggle because they can't make ends meet. We have to address those people. I agree that jobs are a part of the formula, but the first thing you got to do is rein in taxes. You have to rein in taxes. Do you guys know that if you had a $200,000 house that went up by 30% this year to $260,000, your taxes went up by over $800, and 52.5% of those taxes will go back to Pocatello. So yeah, you got a raise, but we're taking it back from you. The city council voted to take all that they could, except maybe $10,000 or $15,000 of the tax limit. It was just the fortune of the levy rate dropping and the assessments coming in higher than they did that kept us from having to claim the 800,000+ and we had to claim 500,000+. Now, it's important, I think, to understand taxes. And I think I know taxes as well as anybody that you can find in Pocatello except the professionals. When you look at our tax base, you understand that we've been farming it out to businesses, but we haven't farmed it out to bring in the jobs we should. If you look at what has happened in terms of the abatements, those abatements are simply pushing taxes off on the rest of the taxpayers. Whenever we do an abatement of $100 million or $20 million, it says, make it up taxpayers. Make it up people who work outside of that industry. And even the people in that industry help make up the abatement. I'm using that as a tax incentive. We use a lot of tax incentives. We have to be smart about how we recruit business. And we have to be smart first by having pride in Pocatello. I don't think Pocatello has to be given away to anybody. And we don't have to give it away in the form of tax abatements. We have a wonderful community, and it can be a better community. We have amenities here that people are jealous of. We have amenities here that people travel from Canada to Arizona and intentionally stop to use our bike trails here. We have all kinds of recreational amenities, but we're not marketing those like we could. Tourism, in most cases, ranges from number 3 to number 1 industry in Idaho. But we don't really get behind our tourism industry like we should. We need to bring jobs, but we also need to bring jobs that don't just pay minimum wage. And we don't need to bring jobs to industries that glut our businesses here. We brought several restaurants into town that hired pretty good staffs, but some of them have closed. Others that were existing restaurants closed because we did not assess the market appropriately. you will find I'm a champion for Pocatello and doing the assessment that we need to do for Pocatello in terms of our people and how we move forward. We should have done a complete inventory on the TIF district we created. Because that TIF district, which a bunch of developers and a bunch of people say is really good, but what happens when we are only collecting $100,000 or $200,000 and $300,000, just a little over, at the end of the TIF cycle? We've set aside millions of dollars in taxes to go for infrastructure. We will not see any tax dollars other than that little set aside based on farm land value until 2041. Now tell me who's going to pay for police, who's going to pay for fire, who's going to pay for all the amenities we have to provide, our streets. They'll be able to use our recreation program without having to pay any extra. They can just come use it. So my name is Roger Bray, and I support you guys entirely.
Ethan, your turn.
My name is Ethan Ennis. I love Pocatello. I grew up here, and I plan on living here and enjoying our community for a very long time. I'm a local business owner. I own my own insurance agency, and I work with businesses and individuals on benefits such as health insurance, dental, and vision. A lot of my clients treat me as a problem solver. They bring not just with insurance. It comes down to I am approachable, and I believe in helping people because it's the right thing to do. As far as participating in Pocatello, aside from my day job, I am a member of the Pocatello-Chubbuck Chamber of Commerce. I participate in their legislative council. I'm a huge supporter of Bannock development. Economic development and growth is it's the most important issue for the next 4 years. Pocatello is growing, and it's going to grow whether we're ready for it or not. And Bannock development, they're a fantastic team of people that they do a lot of thankless work. I participate in this community through Idaho Fish and Game. I'm a hunter's education and bow hunter safety instructor, and it's a lot of fun to not just kids, but adults who take the course. We get to work on a lot of fun things, including handling firearms and teaching them how to be safe out there on the mountain. I'm a USA Archery Level 2 coach, and I teach archery lessons at Daybreak Family Archery. Yeah, I really do love this community, and it is a really exciting time to be a citizen here. We have a ton of projects. They've mentioned Northgate. We've got other projects going on. Northgate seems to get all the press, but there are a lot of businesses that are looking to Pocatello. They're looking to move here, and I can't imagine anywhere else in Idaho that's going to grow the way we are over the next 4 years. I know I can help bring progress and change in Pocatello. This community needs council members who bring inspiration and hope to our community. There's a lot of businesses in town that look to our growth to survive, and we need to bring that, we need to have that inspiration so our local businesses are confident when they reinvest their hard-earned dollars back into their business, and they do remodels, and they hire more employees. They need to be confident that Pocatello is moving in the right direction. We need positive leadership. All the time, we hear the problems, but we need the positive leadership. I know I can bring these strengths to our city and our community. Thank you.
I'm Mr. Idaho Lorax, and I've never seen so many people in such a delusion. Bringing jobs. I ran on platforms of jobs. How many in this room testified at the EPA hearing? Anyone else? Anyone asked for billions of dollars in cleanup? Anyone else other than me? I didn't think so. Definitely not the people on this council here. or this group of people up here. But I'm going to tell you a story, okay? Because I do know about jobs, because I ran on jobs. I work with the university, and if you were up there with the reception just last week, you would have seen the support I have over there. Okay, because they can't survive in the most radioactive city in the world without being a leader in cleanup. Just can't happen. And that's the case of a lot of things, whether it's Amy's, whether it's Costco, whether it's uranium materials right behind it, doesn't matter. Nobody's done an assessment about nuclear materials. We've just made it worse since the last time I was here in the 80s. But let me tell you this story. I testified in an EPA hearing years ago with the tobacco industry was there too. It was about a Superfund site called the Ben Lomond Superfund site. And in that discussion in Idaho, it's an Idaho facility or Idaho place of Superfund, and it was basically a discussion on covering it up with 10 feet of topsoil. To make my story short, I just basically was there and spoke too, but I added a little joke at the end. I said, what are we going to do with Pocatello? Bury it in 20 feet of topsoil? That's the seriousness of what it was even then. Now, the tobacco companies and representatives were there too. They were impressed by what I had to say. They took me and met me privately and in meetings. Basically, they wanted to know how the uranium materials got in their cigarettes. And I said, in simplistic form now, where do you get your fertilizer? And they said, here. And I said, there you go. Now talk about loss of jobs. Even the people at FMC and Simplot know, especially Simplot, the tobacco industry took all their contracts out. That stuff is hardly used east of the Mississippi River because that tobacco company is connected to a lot of other other companies, which they also made sure they weren't putting it on their crops. Now, we put it on our city by the truckload, never mind on our crops. So this is what happened. They pulled their money, and they still remember it. Even those who weren't there, they know that they lost those contracts. Billions of dollars. So if that's what we want, we're going to sit in this delusion of what we have and not go for the money that follows me with requesting from the EPA, not our tax dollars, not spending it to polish our roads and make them the shiniest black radioactive roads in the world, but to clean them up, to remove it. There are people here that, they have properties they can't really legally sell. I don't like to use the word condemned. I'd like to use the word clean it up. So this property, which maybe is my ancestors or my family, can have maybe somewhat of a future there because they don't want to pack up and leave and take the Superfund site money, the federal buyout, which everybody's available here has this materials, to leave, sell your home for 3 times what it is. But most of us have roots here, or it's tough to leave. I have relatives that were in Glasgow, and that's a fighting town, but it took a lot. Finally, they said, hell with this shit. I'm going to America. And that's tough. It's tough for anybody to go somewhere else. But we do it because of jobs, or maybe the price of living appears to be lower. We can investigate why all of that is, but this isn't going away. Technology's here. The media's here. I not only work with people all over the country, but 1,000 people I work with, and it's happening everywhere. Cleanup is happening, but we just happen to be number 1. And in several categories, by the way. Doesn't mean other people don't want to be number 1, because they would like to. It's all data-based. So there are places that I work with that are number 1 in Ohio, number 1 in Kansas, number 1 in Oregon, number 1 in California. But we're number 1 in the world. We outdid Fukushima because they did what was supposed to be done. They took people out. Nobody left here except the people been continually leaving here because hoping for a better life. So for the firefighters, they're the people I defend on being safe and the people involved in cleanup because they have the Geiger counters. Thank you.
Andy won't see it.
Hi, I'm Marlon Walker, and I'm really pleased to be here to share what I feel needs to be done, and I'm particularly am glad that the firefighters and the firemen are putting on this dialogue. I have always lived in Idaho. I was born in Idaho Falls, grew up on a farm outside of Shelley, graduated from Shelley High School, came to Pocatello. Been here 53 years. I've seen a lot of changes in the city. In fact, when I came, it was a city manager government. I've seen it change to a strong mayor government. I've seen all kinds of changes and growth over those years. And during that time, I've been a contributor to the community. I graduated from ISU and spent 28 years teaching at Pocatello High School. Then I went into the corporate world and worked for Ballard Medical when it was taken over by Kimberly Clark, and spent some time in the medical division of that company, writing and rewriting and cleaning up their standard operating procedures to comply with the FDA regulations. Then after I helped them translate all that into Spanish, they outsourced to Mexico. And after a couple of weeks on unemployment, I went to ISU, where I spent the last 7 years of my career teaching in the College of Technology as an educational training coordinator, based on my experience with 28 years of teaching in the public schools. While I was in the public schools, I was also chief negotiator for the Teachers Association. Back then, we didn't call it a union, because union is kind of a dirty word in Idaho back in the 70s. But I was head negotiator for 3 years, and then I was president for 3 more after that. During that time, I helped the district and the school and the Teachers Association move to an interest-based collaborative bargaining program that the main premise was win-win. And that's something I would like to help do here after this contentious negotiations that we just got over. As far as in recent years, I do some teaching for the New Knowledge Adventures program. I contract with ISU to cover special classes. And for the last 2 or 3 years, I've also been president of the Bannock County Historical Society. And I will agree with some of the other speakers that we have some resources here that are probably the best kept secrets in the state. Our historic complex up there is wonderful. The Fort Hall commemorative replica, the Bannock County Historical Museum, and so on. And those things need to be touted. As for what I would like to do as a city councilman, is to improve dialogue between all the county employees, to be open and honest and have everything above board. I don't believe in backroom deals or secret group decisions outside of the office. I think it's time to effect a change. I'd like to see responsibility and clarity and transparency in government, openness, and so on. I'm committed to doing what's right and to listening to people and what their thoughts are and what they would like to see done. I know we have some issues with the animal shelter. We have some issues with relationships among employees. We have issues with salary disparity and a number of things like that. And those are things that I feel I am particularly qualified to work on. My favorite uncle was a firefighter. His son, my same age, was a firefighter himself till he passed. My brother was a sheriff's deputy in Bonneville County. I have a nephew who just retired after several years as a sheriff's deputy here. So I have had family connections with the issues involving firefighters and law enforcement people almost my whole life. And I'd like to work with that, and I'd like to work with improving relationships. I'd also like to work for prosperity for Pocatello. I agree with some of the other speakers that the poverty level here is phenomenal. If you just look at some of the trailer communities and how some of the old university neighborhood is developing into what I call second or tertiary level housing, as they build new things that university students want to live in, all of the older housing is becoming, well, less than desirable to people who want the amenities, and the neighborhoods are changing, and I think we need to improve that. I agree that we need to bring in industry. We need to bring in jobs that are above the subsistence level. Besides just service industries, we need something in here. In the time that I've lived in Pocatello, I've seen Sweigert's go out. I've seen the railroad take off. I've seen Bucyrus Erie pull out. Heinz pulled out. Why is that? Those are some things we need to work on to make this community desirable for industry to come in. Thank you.
Thank you. So for our questions, we're going to give you guys 2 minutes to respond, and we'll start, and we'll just rotate to our right, looking at you guys. So we're going to start this one with Roger, and then Ethan will be next, and then on down the line. This year there was a very contentious and public negotiations with both police and fire unions. What would you do to improve this process going forward?
The first thing I think we could have done is made our offer more realistic. There were some of us that suggested that.
Your time's up.
So, some of us suggested that I, in fact, suggested that we ought to start out at 6%. I thought that was the real territory. That's where experience comes in. That's where we know what the history of the council is. We're dealing with the police and the firefighters. You know that the firefighters have been on a 4-year contract, and they're going to be the ones that lead the way. And 6%, based on inflation and everything else, seemed like the right territory to be in based on what we knew our income would be. First meeting out, I suggested 6%. Second thing I think we ought to do is we need to know that this process is flawed. I've listened to you, and I've already talked to some of our staff about how we need to look at our process and see how we can change it. I've even suggested that we might need to put out a request for proposal. We'll see where that goes. But we need to be looking at finding a better way of dealing with our public people. The biggest point of contention was something that should not even be tolerated by anybody when our spokesperson, and we have to take ownership of that because that person was our spokesperson, really stepped out and defied the police integrity. So we need to have somebody who knows history of the length of contract, need to know the history of recent raises, need to know that we have to have competitive wages, we need to know that we need to stick to our payment plan that we've established several years ago and keep integrity with that.
Ethan, same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. This year, there was a very contentious and public negotiations with both the police and fire unions. What would you do to improve this process going forward?
The way I see it, as elected officials, the buck stops here. And we are responsible for our employees, and it includes the firemen and the policemen. I don't believe in outsourcing the negotiations to an attorney from Boise. I think that, and to boot, it was funded by your own department budgets. To me, that's a slap in the face. If we are qualified council people, I believe that we can take ownership of the negotiations. We do have attorneys on our own staff. So improving the negotiations in years to come, we need to take ownership of it ourselves. We need to treat our firemen and our policemen with the respect they deserve and seriously consider the things they ask for. I can't imagine what it would be like to do their job. City council people are responsible for balancing the budget. They need to have a little bit more of an active role in the negotiations. The wages, the benefits for our first responders come out of that budget. And as we adjust our budget, I think they can have a little bit stronger and more active seat at the table with the city council people. So that's what I would do. Don't outsource the negotiations to someone that it's not personal for them. So that's what I would do. Thank you.
Well, we published some of that discussion, and of course, you got to bad deal in the first place. You're a union, you know? Let's face it, as long as you're a union in this community, which is not really pro-union, you're going to have difficulty. But I support union people because that's what it is, a union, coming together, supporting people, and especially safety issues, which is where most unions started over, safety. Safety on the job, whether it was miners back in the 1800s or whatever. Safety is always number one, and then trying to make a living, paying your bills and having a family, that was number two. There's no doubt about that, because you can't pay those bills if you ain't alive. So safety and decent wage. So I agree. I thought that was well put in terms of, yeah, well, why do we have a negotiating team? Just another job for somebody? You know, yes, if we're the city council, we should be honoring you, dealing with you face to face, hearing, listen, learning, because you're the specialist. Let's learn both, go. Yes, we always got to back up to read the legal papers, make sure everything's got the dots and all that kind of stuff done. But basically, yeah, sit there together. It's what our role is. Thank you.
Well, having done all those years in negotiation, it started off with adversarial bargaining. Everybody took a position, and it was contentious, and it was pretty much lawyer against lawyer, except our side didn't have a lawyer. So one of the first things I would do is develop negotiating teams and work towards an interest-based conflict resolution kind of bargaining, where collaborative, actually, where the two teams could get together maybe 2 or 3 times a year and talk over what the concerns are, because the concerns build up all over the year. And it isn't just at the springtime or when contract time is due that you start saying, okay, we need this, that, or the other thing. Because as some of the others have said, a lot of times negotiations is not always about money. It's about safety, it's about conditions, it's about equipment and things like that. So I would try to move the city towards interest-based, conflict-free, mediated if necessary, win-win bargaining, where everybody takes the various positions seriously, discusses them openly, and goes into the whole process with an idea that we are going to solve this together by listening to what the other side says, weighing the pros and cons, finding the facts. I know money is always important, and that's usually the first thing you know that's there, and that's usually the first thing people go for. But backing that up, to do that, we have to have responsible spending and responsible budgeting to make sure that that pot of money and the other benefits and things that are there are there. Thank you.
Same question?
Same question, would you like me to repeat it?
No, I think I got it. Thank you.
Okay.
In my opinion, we need to develop a more cooperative environment within the city and the unions that are in Pocatello. As I mentioned before, you guys are my heroes. I've lived there. I lived in DC when that plane hit there. When my son died, was killed in a car wreck, it was you guys that went and extracted him from the car. So I know what you're up against. I feel your pain. And we need to put your needs above others that work with the city. To do that, we need smart spending. And when we have smart spending, we have leakage in all the other departments. There's leakage in every government department. And as a forensic analysis, when I was at GE, I had to look at budgets all the time to determine where there was poor spending and where there was good spending. And by bringing in jobs, which creates tax revenue for the community, and it doesn't matter what jobs, but there are strategic jobs that we need to have. By capitalizing on the university, capitalizing on the people that you have and making things collaborative, we can make that happen. You deserve to get paid what you're worth, not what we think you're worth. Thank you.
Ethan, next question starts with you.
Yep.
What should the relationship be between the city council and the police department or the fire department?
The relationship between the city council and the police department and fire department. we are all on the same team. As community leaders on this side, our policemen and our firemen need to know that their leaders are behind them. I couldn't do the job that you guys do, but I can support you and I can back you up. And the relationship, it's deteriorated quite a bit. You know, I can't imagine not having faith in my first responders, and it makes no sense for them not to have faith in the city leadership. We need to have their back, whether it's negotiating raises or as we grow, as our community grows, as we fill new positions, as we help them grow the departments. Man, it's got to be cooperative. We have to have a cooperative relationship, and we got to hear their voice. They know the needs of their department much better than I would ever understand it. I can learn about it and I can listen to them, but it's got to be a cooperative relationship, and they need the council people and the mayor to stand behind them 100%. And that's the way I see it. That's got to be the relationship. Thank you.
I'll begin with another candidate's not here today. Couldn't make it yesterday, but I basically believe in the relationship as a peace officer rather than a police officer. That's where I stand in terms of the fire department. The word bargaining, collective bargaining, that was a word for other uses back in history. That shouldn't be a bargaining with people who save lives. Period. It's just not a term we negotiate all that much about. You know, we look at what we have and do the best we can. But we don't start saying, well, what are you going to give up? What are you going to give up? It's not this bargain going on like we're at a crap table or something. This is safety of our children's lives at school and the contamination things there. Safety in our community. Safety where the politicians don't go say, silence him, arrest Idaho Lorak because he's in the building. Okay? In other words, oath keepers. I'm an oath keeper. Okay? I respect those and those people in our police force and others that are oath keepers will not do something that's illegal. And that's something that our community needs to support that. Otherwise, the things do get out of hand. Because government wants the police force to just be an extension of their authority. Intimidation of the citizens. And that's not how it should be. We should be a relationship, as we call them, the peace officer. And the fire department, I don't never go enough to save lives. That's just one heck of a job. I have friends that have been it. I've been a firefighter in the past. I have forestry background too. And basically, it's a dangerous situation. They put their lives on the line when they do it. And I don't know how you put a price on that. That is difficult. Thank you.
I got the question. Improving relationship. I think what we need to do is create a strong sense of value in all the employees in the city. We have a commission for everything. We've got a mayor's advisory commission on the animal shelter. We have an advisory commission on the planning and zoning and all of that. I think we should have almost a monthly forum where there could be open and back and forth dialogue between and among the council and the firefighters and the police officers. Sort of like coffee with the mayor, except have an open door policy, and that's what I'd have. Come on in if you got a problem or you have an issue. Let's talk about it now before it gets bigger. And then maybe come to sort of a solution to work on things like that. I do know that if people don't feel valued, they're not happy in their jobs, and problems do arise. I've seen that in other places. So I think an open dialogue all year long, whether it's formal or informal, would be something that would go a long way towards improving that relationship. As others have said, it's not just all about the money. Many jobs In fact, most jobs are some sort of a calling or a drive to do that, and that's especially true among law enforcement people and firefighters. I know I couldn't do it. I wouldn't want to do it, and I appreciate those who do. And I appreciate the risk they go to. I mean, their families, policemen leave every day. No, they're never sure they're going to come home. Firefighters get a call, they go out, they never know what they're going to face. Fortunately, they're well trained and they have the very best equipment possible. But still, the risk is so much greater than someone who sits in an office behind a desk and whatever. And I think having an open dialogue about all of those issues and the issues as they come up would be very important.
Mr. Z,
Just try me one more time.
what should the relationship be between the city council and the police department and the fire department?
I think I pretty much answered that question before when I talked about an environment that needs to be cohesive and that we work together. But I do have to say one thing about money is important. I mean, if you're not making good money, there's no reason for you to be here. You can go to Idaho Falls or another city to make better money. And so we need to take care of you. And there's two reasons why morale gets low. One, you're either not making enough money, or some fire chief or somebody makes a decision that you don't get along with. And so you can fix that internally. And I think when those things happen, that you should be able to come to city council or the mayor and have those open discussions without the fear of losing your job. But the most important thing is we need to take care of you. That's the bottom line. If we take care of you, you're going to take care of us.
I can do that. Yep. I think our relationship needs to be collaborative, that we need to work with each other to enhance your positions, but also enhance the safety of all Pocatello. I was on the police advisory group from its inception until I came on the council in 2006. Through that program, we got the SRO, the Student Resource Officer Program. People talk about doing things, we did things. We got the SRO program. It's been one of the best programs we brought into Pocatello. When there was issues in the police department regarding the previous police chief, not real recent, people came to me, we took that up the ladder and we got the problem addressed. When I heard from you folks that our pay was way low and we were not competing adequately, I was the champion for helping us move to a new pay plan because we needed to address those inequities. I have been loyal to that pay plan since its inception. That's how come I suggested the 6%, because I was aware with my experience that we were addressing issues that had been long unaddressed. So another way that we can address some of your problems, when the ambulance calls were just going skyrocketing, I was the only elected official that came out publicly at the Chamber of Commerce, who came out publicly in the paper and said, we need to get that levy passed. We can't have an optimum relationship with you when part of your salary increase comes at the expense of other employees in your departments. We can't cut 2 people out of police and 3 out of fire and say all is well. I tried to address that when it came back to budget meeting, when we tried to look at our expending, and I said we should address it, but I couldn't get one council member to support that. We need to be putting you first in our city.
Okay, this question will start with Mr. Lorax. Since it was mentioned before, how do you feel about the city hiring a law firm from Boise to represent them? And do you support continuing to use this firm or going in a different direction?
Well, if I get elected, there's a lot of people's going to be changing in terms of who we do the negotiating here, because it's been too much of a buddy system here, too much of a buddy system. And that's where corruption derives from. So what would I do? I don't know who they are. And I'd like to, you got to evaluate yourself. We just don't accept somebody's name. I know attorneys. Most of them I don't care much about. But there are good attorneys out there, like there are bad attorneys. Same with groups. But how much do we need attorneys to negotiate again for our safety in our community? What the heck are they doing here anyways? This is not a legal battle. This is not a bargaining. You know, we got enough of the lawyers in our state government. You know, all they do is legislate corruption. So as far as I'm concerned, it should be the people elected working with our departments and our employees that we work together to solve our problems and maintain that support. So that's the best I'm going to answer that, because I don't know who the heck they are, and I don't trust everybody in Boise, even though we have a media outlet now in Boise too. So I'll have to learn about them.
Mr. Walker, would you like me to repeat the question?
I got the question.
Okay.
I am not happy about hiring an outside attorney out of town. If we're going to hire one, let's hire one in town, but we don't need to hire one at all. The city already has an attorney. And I think the problem with using attorneys to bargain is their training, not to put down attorneys, but their training is to win. They're trained to win cases, to win divorces, to win contracts, and that's the attitude they go in with, which means they take a stand rather than wanting to compromise or work things out. And I think that a negotiating team from both sides or all sides of people who know each other and know the conditions and interests of the community, coupled with the city lawyer if you need him there to keep things legal or answer legal questions or make sure something isn't against code or against city ordinance, is all we really need. And so, no, I'm against hiring anybody from out of town to do things in here. We have contractors here, we have builders, we have other things, but I'm always hearing about an architecture firm from somewhere or a building company from somewhere else, Utah or something, coming in. And I don't think that's right. I think we should keep things local, keep them here, and I feel the same way about negotiations and any kind of contract bargaining. But I would prefer it be collaborative and from a win-win basis from the start.
I'll repeat it because you're staring at me.
Thanks.
So since it was mentioned, how do you feel about the city hiring a law firm from Boise to represent them? Do you support continuing to use this firm or going in a different direction?
Definitely going in a different direction. What I hear is that this is the way it's always been done. And as mentioned earlier, I challenged the status quo. I changed the rules of the game. While at GE, I negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts without attorneys. What we did is we came up with what's called an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, with all the T's and C's that needed to be in it. Once we were finishing with that Memorandum of Understanding, it was just myself or a president or a CEO, other employees in a room. We then turned the Memorandum of Understanding over to the attorneys and let them come up with the legalese and the T's and C's that they needed to come up with. That's the way you negotiate a contract. That's the way you negotiate with people. Personally, when you get attorneys in a room, they all want to win. But we want to win also, and so do you. So that's the best way to do it.
I can get it in. First of all, I'm going to say lawyers are not always adversarial. I've been through many dealings with lawyers, and often they work to settle a case rather than win a case. Because when they go to court, they're putting their employees or their employer at great expense. So they often work. Some of the lawyers that become judges are great mediators, and I think we need to understand that. Most often when you need a mediation, you're going to get a lawyer that is a mediator. It goes in divorce, it goes in all kinds of situations. Second thing, I think we need to consider what was so broken that the council, on the advice of a former HR person, decided that they needed to hire an outside attorney. There was something so broken, and some of you have a knowledge of it. I don't think we need to air dirty laundry here, but there were things broken. And so that is an important thing to consider, that they were motivated by a former HR director. There are no excuses for, as I have said, the way our negotiator handled things this year, particularly when he made bad faith and broke faith in his remarks. I've already said that I've suggested that we take an alternative look at what we need to do for our negotiation going forward. Some of you don't have the history, but we've only had a negotiator for 4 years. It's only been for 4 years. Third thing, the accounting should be done by moving any type of administrative expense into administrative programs. It should be on the mayor and council if they want to hire someone to have that come out of their budget. It should not come out of the police or fire budgets. There's an accounting principle that needs to be exercised. So one of the things I would say to you is, we understand that it's broken now, but it was broken several years ago when I came back on the council, and I know what we were forced to change at that time.
Ethan, same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, I've got the question. Thank you. I was very disheartened that we hired someone from Boise who did not treat it as a personal issue to negotiate against our own first responders. I would be very, very, very opposed to ever hiring that attorney again or their firm. Moving forward, our employees, city, our firefighters, our administrative staff, all of the city employees, when they come to us for a pay raise, it is because they're not being compensated fairly. We're losing our experienced staff to other cities. As the city council people who set the budget, it's up to us to fix that. And if we're qualified to set the budget, then we're qualified to work with our own employees, to work with our own first responders. I think that needs to come back to the council and the city attorneys. It needs to be personal. Because at the end of the day, as elected officials, that's what our citizens expect from us. And like I said earlier, the buck stops here. Thank you.
Next question, we're starting with you, Mr. Walker. What is your strategy for increasing resources available for the city? And how do you bring in new businesses to increase revenue?
Whoa. Strategy for improving resources for the city and bringing new industry. Well, there are a number of things in place right now. The Small Business Administration, things like that. We need to work with that. But I think we need to go beyond that and market the city in such a way that businesses and industries want to come in, particularly ones that provide more than subsistence pay and minimum wage jobs. And perhaps doing that would be some kind of a graduated tax increase rather than giving them the whole cake for 3 or 4 years and then taking that cake away. I mean, we've seen so many come in and so many go out that I think marketing the community, and I mean the whole community, the schools, the government, the parks, we have a wonderful community to market for companies to come in. I know that a few years ago when the FBI was planning their big increase, they came to town and said, we need to build a bunch of housing. Well, people weren't sure about that, and that's coming now. That's going to employ a lot of people. Costco is here, that's employing a lot of people. But I think we need more than just service industries. We need more than stores. We need more than restaurants and boutiques and whatever. We need some kind of industry. I've seen so many go out that employed so many people at living wages that were valuable, and that's the kind of industry we need to go for. We should market Idaho. We should market Pocatello. I mean, we have 29 parks. We've got a good swimming pool. We've got mountains and fishing and hunting around, and those kind of things bring people in, but also the schools. When I was yearbook advisor at Pocatello High School, almost every year I would get a call from some corporation that wanted me to send them a yearbook because they wanted to see what kind of schools we had for their people. And very often they went somewhere else. So anyway, thank you.
Mr. Zeeby?
Don's fine. Mr. Zeeby passed away.
Need me to read the question again, or?
Please.
What is your strategy for increasing resources available for the city, and how do you bring in new businesses to increase city revenue?
It's a great question. It's a loaded question as well, because when you're talking about the jobs guy, and I bring in a lot of jobs, one of the areas that, just let me share a story with you. I recently had a company that came into town that was looking to locate here that would generate upwards of 50 jobs, high-paying jobs. When we sat down and we went through the different properties that we looked at and for build-to-suit and for them to buy it, when we analyzed the tax structure of what was going to be done, they recognized that the tax structure in Pocatello was higher than any of the other tax structures in any parts of Idaho that they looked at. So they declined to come here simply because of the tax structure. And we're not going to just fix the tax structure overnight. What we need to do is try to create more business, but also the thing that we've got to do, and we've talked about it before, is smart spending. We need to look at all of the things that we spend on, doing a really good analysis, and spend our money in smart ways and not stupid ways, thus bringing down the tax basis. That's really important. If we can do that, we can attract other businesses. The other thing that we should really capitalize on is Idaho State University. I'm a graduate from Idaho State. I'm really proud of it. I love Pocatello. And the great thing about Idaho State that we failed to look at from an economic development perspective is capitalizing on the degrees and certificates that they deliver. If we just looked at all the employees that they send out of state every year just in their welding program, it would blow your mind. But if we could bring those companies here where they could capitalize on those welding programs, that would create great jobs, significant money, and good taxes.
Okay, I think.
Mr. Bray?
When we look at how we would increase revenue by increasing growth, one of the first things I think we think of is we default to how we get new things in here. One of the things I think we ought to do is talk about how we grow what is here already. There are all kinds of programs around the United States. Instead of chasing after the mythical big company that's going to come in and solve all problems, they invest in their small businesses, and they give them incentives in terms of taxes, and they always put measurable standards with them. They always talk about how many jobs they have to create. They talk about what the salary has to be, and if they don't maintain it, then the incentives go away. We have stopped doing that. We did that when we brought in Costco, and we did that even though Hoku was a flop. That was part of the structure for Hoku. Now we can say Hoku was a disaster, but understand we competed on a worldwide basis to get that company in here. We had no control over how they managed their company once we got them here. We had no control over them going from $250 million plant to a $750, $800 million plant. We had no control over how they would spend their money. They are a business. But in order to get the incentives, they had to employ, and they didn't get that, and we were able to recapture Pocatello City's investment there. The thing that I think we ought to also do is we need to maintain tax control. We had a big issue about branding in our budget, says I think $30,000. You can't change your brand when somebody else is branding you like Boise has branded Pocatello. Pocatello is in their flow chart over there as the highest taxing entity in Idaho, and they display it on their webpage. So you can't do things to get business in here if you don't change. Why would you come to Pocatello when our taxes would cost you a couple jobs just to break even on the taxes?
Go ahead and read it again. Thank you.
What is your strategy for increasing resources available for the city? How do you bring in new businesses to increase city revenue?
I love this question. We increase revenue for the city by growing the tax base. We grow the tax base three ways. We need fair taxes. When other businesses and other residents look to this area, and they are looking, they do look at the taxes. They look at the affordability. They look to see if it's fair, especially on the business level. We need affordable housing. Companies consider housing when they move here. It doesn't need to be cheap, it doesn't need to be a large inventory, but it needs to be affordable. It needs to fit what their employees want. We need a skilled workforce. I work with a ton of businesses in town that have a hard time finding employees that are skilled. We have some of the lowest unemployment right now. And this is a good thing. There are a lot of companies that are looking to our area because we sit at a crossroads for transportation, east and west, as well as north and south with I-15. We have a ton of resources for graduates in our area. We're in Salt Lake City's impact zone. Right now, we need to market ourselves to businesses that complement our culture here in Pocatello. We need more manufacturing jobs that require skilled workforce. We need assembly jobs. And honestly, I believe a lot of that can be achieved by partnering with our unions. There's a lot of resources, but Pocatello is growing, and it's happening whether we're ready for it or not. And I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lorax.
Well, I'm excited too, because I know the more people come here, eventually somebody's going to sue the shit out of a lot of people, because that's just the nature of being lured into the most radioactive city in the world, and don't tell them. That's illegal. Okay, it's just like the asphalt on the roads, where the state, agreement, we're not supposed to recycling asphalt's a good thing, but not from here. You can't. Okay, and they know you're not supposed to recycle it. So instead of having billions of dollars of cleanup of our roads, we decided just to put another cap on them and make them look pretty for a while more, but they're still radioactive. Okay? How many have even seen the map done in 1986 of our whole valley? Anybody? Are you that ignorant? Or want to stay that ignorant? You won't even look at the data that the government did? Flew over here with a German Messerschmitt helicopter and mapped the whole goddamn place. Okay? We got that thing. We made it public for the world. Not just here. When I first came here, I made it public for every agency in this community, in this valley. Every one. So you could do something about it. So I come with money not from here, but from elsewhere, from the people who should be involved in its cleanup, the people who are responsible for it. In 1986, there was a lot more put in since then, okay? That's the problem. You don't stop it, it just gets worse. Playing a shell game with illegal dumping and putting it here, digging up here and putting it over here, digging it up here, putting it back in the alleyway over here in that neighborhood. It's no wonder we're a mess. And this is depression of our children. People know, young people know what's going on. It's the adults. You ought to watch that series, 13 Reasons Why. And read mine, 9 lives of why you have this big problem, which has been spread all around the country. So anyways, I do whatever I can for cleanup. And there's a lot of money, jobs with it.
Mr. Zeeby, this question is going to start with you. Where do you stand on collective bargaining, and will you support getting both unions recognized in city code? Where do you stand on collective bargaining, and will you support getting both unions recognized in city code?
I don't see it necessary to have collective bargaining. I would agree that it's a very old term, but I think that we can sit down together. I can work with anybody. But I believe we should be able to sit down together and work through the situations and issues that confront us, and be able to pay everyone what they're worth, and exactly resolve their issues, just like we do with any others. And that's all I need to say about that. But I would also like to add, Mr. Lorax, I take offense at your language, and I would appreciate it if you wouldn't use such vulgarities or take the Lord's name in vain. Thank you.
Thank you for telling me. I'll keep that on your account.
Okay, Mr. Bray.
I would support putting it in code or doing a resolution, whatever it takes to to back unions more formally by the city. People need to know my wife was a union member till she retired. My daughter is a union member. My dad was a union steward at the place he worked. I wouldn't be here with the education I've got if it wasn't for unions. Unions put the bread and butter on the table. They helped me to go to college. They helped me to go on to get my advanced degree at Texas Christian University. They were part of the backbone that our family needed to survive and to thrive. There are statistics that show that union families produce more college graduates than any other families in our society, because it's the will of self-improvement that union people have. People, when they're in a union, are not just considering themselves, they're considering their family. They're considering the generations that follow. And they're working hard to make sure that they are safeguarding that future by what they're doing in their careers. So yes, I will support unions. I have supported unions. I am a product of unions. Unfortunately, I've said this before, and somebody said we could unionize, but in ministry, there's no union. But I can support without being a union member myself. When my wife first started work, that's the first thing I encouraged her to do, was become a union member. Because you are represented better when you have a group, a fraternity or a organization behind you than you are when you're on your own. So I support unions.
I'm a believer in collective bargaining. Every large industry has either a trade group or a union. And it's because we are stronger collectively than we are as individuals. And I do believe we need to recognize our firefighters and police unions in the city code. And not only will I support that, I will roll up my sleeves and work to get that done. Absolutely. It's going to be a good thing. Thank you.
Will you repeat it again,
Yes, sir.
please?
So where do you stand on collective bargaining, and will you support getting both unions recognized in city code? And please try to watch language.
Yes. Basically, as I've already said, I don't believe in anything except what we call collaborative cooperation, cooperatives, government that way. I do not believe in a strong mayor system. I believe in a people's government. I believe a people participation government. I believe in that in terms of working with our city employees, everything. This is all one team, one group of people trying to survive here under all its difficulties. So I would say, welcome to sit down with anybody ever and work out the problems, because I am a problem solver. Did I answer good enough?
You got it done in 2 minutes, so it must be.
I mean, it seems repetitive of what we were discussing before, so.
I am absolutely in favor of recognizing bargaining units officially. It serves a number of purposes. First, it puts groups together who can discuss among themselves their needs and their issues and come up with the plan or the program or the platform that they want to put forward. It also gives a large group a chance to pick the spokespeople who will represent their ideas and things. And if any group is not recognized to become an official bargaining unit, that's a very sad thing. I've worked in places where that was not the case, and you're boiled down to the individual going in and asking for the raise. But recognizing unions is absolutely important, just for the organization that it gives and the lack of chaos that it prevents, or that it engenders, I should say. It prevents chaos because you have a bargaining unit, you know who's in that bargaining unit, and with Idaho as a right to work state, which is all right too, but a lot of people don't have the advantage of that situation where they can get together, decide collectively what their needs are, what their wishes are, and what they would like. And then on the other side, you have the other side of the bargaining unit, which works well as long as it is collaborative and cooperative. So yes, I would definitely support recognizing the police and fire unions both in city code. Thanks.
Mr. Bray, you're up.
Okay.
What is your philosophy in addressing compensation gaps and inequity among the groups of workers? For example, first responders in comparison to general employees.
Well, I think I don't need to say a lot, because if you watch the tape, you'll find out that I came out favoring first responders over adding other positions in our city. I came out and said that we should not be cutting our workforce in the police department, fire department. We should be cutting some of the new jobs we were adding, because I felt like it's so important for us to not have you folks, your morale depleted because you're working overtime, because you're not having as many people to call on as you had before. So I was very, very adamant about supporting our first responders and taking that issue to the forefront at our council meeting. One of the other things that I think is real important to know, some of you know that Chris Stevens and Claudia Ortega and I are running as a united group. One of the discussions we had in running, we vetted each other, and one of the things I vetted was how well they would support our first responders. And I found that they were very adamant about supporting our first responders. That's part of why I was willing to run with them. I also know that they look at taxes very seriously, and they look at the management of taxes. They're not against spending if spending is justifiable, but to just throw in money as an answer, they're not for that. We need to be very, very competent in our considerations. And I think, quite frankly, my own opinion was, with a little cutting, we didn't have to go to the taxpayers this year and seek a higher tax rate. Just think what the tax rate would have dropped to if we'd taken $500 and some thousand off of our ask.
I'll hear it again.
What is your philosophy in addressing compensation gaps and inequity among groups of workers? For example, first responders in comparison to general employees.
Okay. Compensation gaps between groups of workers. I believe we need to set the pay for the job that is being done. It is very difficult to compare unequal job positions and determine pay. You can't determine the pay of an administrator or support staff off of our first responders' pay rate, and vice versa. I believe in separating those job descriptions so they can receive their own pay scale, especially for compensation based on years of service. The longer you are with a department, you should be compensated more, especially our first responders. So that's how I would address the inequity and unbalance between the groups. Pay the employee for the job that's being done. You can't compare the job descriptions to do that. Thank you.
Well, I have saved several people in my life, and I don't always like the feeling that how they treat me from then on the rest of their life. It's an owing. I know when you save somebody's life, it's important to people. It's important to that person. Very important. But, you know, we have volunteer departments around the country, all over the place, that are the first responders. And I myself, in situations where I saved lives, I had to be the first responder. In terms of risk and safety, that's what I'm concerned about. And sometimes I see a street employee, if it doesn't know the safety and the issues, can put themselves into tremendous risk as well. And so I don't like the generalization. I don't like putting people up on a pedestal. I myself save lives, save thousands of lives, have saved thousands of lives. And I've had to face the risks of being abducted, being harassed, being, my rights violated, threatened my life. Brian Blatt pushing the kill button under the table one time. I mean, yes, but do I ask for anything? I only want my children and my children's children, the children here, to have a future, and hopefully you with them, because they are our best asset here. And sometimes it's not their fault when the mayor says, no, you cannot use your Geiger counter and put it over here and do that. So we lose him. Somebody who'd been a first responder, somebody who saved lives, our other hazmat director is now gone. Yeah, prevented from verifying, from uploading data. That's what we deal with the government here. So I totally feel we need to support all our employees here for safety in this community.
Mr. Walker.
Got it. I agree. It's very hard to compare jobs. There are a number of ways you can do it. Amount of training necessary, amount of risk, and that sort of thing. The old saying, equal pay for equal work, doesn't apply in a case like this. I agree with Mr. Ennis. You need to analyze the job and with input from the people who are earning the money. I mean, I certainly think that in certain instances and certain times there is a great deal of risk. The rest of the time there isn't. But time on the job, years of training, expertise required, additional education. I know for most certifications you have to get so much education periodically. Those things should all be considered, but you can't compare apples to oranges. I mean, an executive sitting behind a desk signing papers with the secretary to take his notes and things is not really at the same risk as someone who gets called out to a fire and has to climb a ladder with smoke coming out a window. But that's only for a very short time. And weighing all of that, I think that the jobs should be considered individually, and I think there should be a graduated scale that is worked on by the people who are doing those jobs in collaboration with the money available and the people who set those things. I think the pay gap is not a good thing, but I think by collaborative discussion, we could come to some conclusion that would satisfy the needs of all. Thank you.
I've mentioned before smart spending. If we were to look at best practices in the private sector to do pay classifications based upon others throughout the country and locally, that would be a real important thing. But I believe that the officials you elect have a duty to put your needs above all others. Thank you.
Okay, so this will be the last question, and we'll start with Mr. Ennis. Why should we endorse you for this position?
I get to go first. All right. I bring a fresh perspective to the City Council, one that's positive and progressive. I work well with groups all across this community, and I love our citizens. I love the community and all the work that's done, and every group has a need to be heard. I'm not driven by political agenda. I do not bring partisan ideas to the City Council. I believe in fairness. Elected or not, I will continue to be involved in this community. It's the community that I have my family in, and this community has some great things going for it. So tonight I ask for your vote. so that I can get to work for this community. Thank you.
Repeat it again, yeah.
Yes, sir. Why should we endorse you for this position?
I could say I really don't care, because it's like what I do in this community already. We have Radioactive City Publishing, and we have Uranium University Publishing. They are opposite sides. One is for the insanity of contaminating our children in a community and people doing, a lot of people not doing anything about it, not even wanting to look. Not even wanting, I mean, it's their lives. They can turn off, they can ignore, but the rest of the world doesn't. And then you got Uranium University, which will be a good name when they become the leaders in cleanup. And all the work that would be done in this community because of it. So here we have these options. Radioactive City, and for those who've seen some of the leaflets of educational data on there as a source for that map I told you about. Okay, the data is there, more than one place, uploaded into the world at sites, okay? Safecast.org, okay? Work with Fukushima. They are our model because they are making strides. You don't put sweepers in Radioactive City to use a vacuum. You don't even flood the roads after because it washes everything away like panning for gold, just leaves the uranium gray in the road, there to be picked up by tires and cars of the size you never want to breathe. But that's up to you. You know, you can continue to ignore your children, ignore what's happening in the world, ignore being the most radioactive city in the world. It's not going to go away. Or you can become involved with the billions of dollars of cleanup and join as a Uranium University to clean up this community and be a world leader, or at least in this country, which has not been done yet. So we hope to be first because you live with it.
Mr. Walker.
Okay. Well, I bring a perspective of history to some degree. I've watched 55 years of city governments do this and that and the other thing, and I think that's a valid thing. But I also think it's time to effect some changes, and I would like to do those responsibly and openly and with clarity. I would have an open door policy or an open email policy if that's what you prefer. I would like to listen to people directly and consider their concerns. I think it's time for that, and I think bringing a little bit of age and wisdom to the deal would help, along with the experience I've had in the various kinds of issues that are currently facing the city. And I would appreciate your vote support in that. It doesn't hurt at all the fact that I'm retired and I have no commercial interest or no business interest tied to anything in the city. I have plenty of time to listen to you, plenty of time to work for you, plenty of time to do the research necessary to find out all the ins and outs of every issue that might come before us, and I am willing to do that. I'm also willing to keep it open and above board and out front. And kind of on a final note, I have to paraphrase something from Mark Twain that I really agree with. He always said that politicians are like diapers. They should be changed often and for the same reason. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't need slogans. What we need is jobs. And that's what I deliver. That's what I do. Everyone's got a plan. We don't need planners. We need a doer. We need action. As I mentioned, the reason that I'm running for city council is for Mike, your Mikes, and all the Mikes and Michelles that live in our community. Because we do need jobs and we do need smarter spending. And if we spend better and do the things that are right, you will get what you deserve. I'd like to thank both the policemen and the firefighters unions for inviting us here this evening. And I don't know where I've sat in the overall scheme of things, but you do need to know that I am in your corner, and I would appreciate your vote. if you're inclined to do so. Thank you.
I'm going to start out by thanking you for the opportunity to be in front of you tonight and to share with you not only my perspectives, but to hear the perspectives of others here. I want you to know that I'm working to make your jobs safe, secure, and rewarding. Rewarding financially, rewarding psychologically, rewarding emotionally. I'm also working to stop our losses that we are having by attrition because we have not made our salaries commensurate with other cities around. I also want you to know that I understand that the pressures you're under. I have had to go in behind some of the developments here to help people that were displaced, to find housing, to find better remuneration than they were receiving. Poverty is a huge issue. You see that in your fire department when you have to go put out a fire, because I believe that you see more fires in inadequate structures than you do in the new structures. Always. I also think the police finds that they're called out more often because of poverty. Because poverty leads to despondency. It leads to a despondency that goes to crime, drugs, alcohol, family situations. All of those things happen when poverty has such a grip on our people. Finally, I said no to the council raises. I said no to the mayor's raise. I think it was a slap in the face for you guys to struggle so hard and then we so cavalierly passed the raises for the council and mayor. I stood against that because you guys should have been rewarded. You people, you men and women. Finally, I would say just this. If you vote for experience, which I think you do, because that's what you value in your departments, you will want to vote for me because I have the experience to deliver to you.
That's all we've got. Thank you for coming, and we appreciate this opportunity to hear from all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.